Hey guys, and welcome to my spoiler review of Deadpool and Wolverine. I'm going to go through what I liked and disliked about this film, but I'm going to start off with the brief synopsis. So the basic plot is that Deadpool is now coming over from the Fox universe into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where his timeline is going to be pruned or essentially removed from history that he previously belonged to. And that obviously includes all the people that he loved. And the only way that he can do that, he's basically given an option by the TVA, the ones who are going to prune it, is that he can either join this new universe, the sacred timeline, or basically die along with them. And so in either scenario, basically, he's facing the concept of losing all of his loved ones. And he sees the only way of saving them is to team up with Logan, Wolverine, to find a Wolverine and essentially destroy the TVA and do whatever they can to preserve that timeline. And so he obviously meets Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, but not the version that we know from the previous X-Men films. This is a new variant who dons the famous yellow costume. They team up together. They go on an adventure that takes them through the Void, which we have seen in season 1 of Loki, which is essentially this place at the end of time. And there's all sorts of weird and wacky things going on there. And it's sort of run by Magneto's evil sister. Her name is Nova. And so they need to defeat her essentially in order to save the timeline, because there's a whole sort of conspiracy going on between her and the TVA. So they basically embark on this weird and wacky adventure where they encounter a whole bunch of characters, a whole bunch of famous cameos, which I'll get into. And yeah, at the end conclusion, this is a spoiler review, they are able to save that timeline, obviously. And so now Deadpool is very much a part of the sacred timeline, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and that's where we're left with the end of the film. So starting off with what I liked, the biggest strong point of this film is the chemistry between Ryan Reynolds' as Deadpool and Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. They are gold on screen together. Any moments that they share together, regardless of how bad the story is or how stupid some of the dialogue is or some of the situations that they find themselves in, their chemistry is just second to none. It's absolutely flawless. They play it as very much like kind of like a buddy cop sort of film where you have the straight man and the funny man. And one of the key things about this film that I was really impressed with is that Hugh Jackman plays it straight as Wolverine in this comedy, this ridiculous comedy where Ryan Reynolds is saying absolutely absurd things all the time. He plays it straight. So he lets Ryan Reynolds be the funny man, and meanwhile he plays the serious one, the foil to that sort of character, and together that just makes gold. I thought the action was a lot of fun too. There are two scenes that really stand out to me in this film with regards to the action. The first one is the fight that takes place in the Honda Odyssey between Deadpool and Wolverine. They fight a few times throughout this film, but this one was really the standout where it all takes place in a car. So it's very cramped, very claustrophobic, and they're just stabbing and going at each other like nuts. It's crazy, blood everywhere, splattering everywhere. It's insane, but it's funny at the same time. But it also has like the lead up to that fight has some sort of weight to it where they are kind of arguing in the car, and Wolverine puts Deadpool firmly in his place by telling him how ridiculous he is and how stupid everything is, and Deadpool essentially gets offended, which leads them to this fight that they both know neither can win. They're just taking out their anger on one another. But then there's another fight, one at the very end of the film, between Deadpool and Wolverine versus all of the Deadpool variants. So it's kind of just a ridiculous scene, an excuse to have this fight between all these Deadpools. It's played for humor and for laughs, with Madonna's Like a Prayer playing in the background as it takes this like one take side shot along a bus, like passing through and killing all these Deadpools going through a bus. It's one non-stop take, and it's a lot of fun. It's great to see. And obviously in that moment you have Wolverine finally putting on his famous helmet, his mask I should say, and so a lot of fun in that scene too. So the action definitely lived up to the hype. This is a Deadpool film, and it really very much has to make us laugh, and I think it definitely did that. And to me, the best jokes that happened in this film were the ones that were the very meta jokes that were referencing the situation going on, obviously with the acquisition of Fox by Disney, and so now them coming over to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. All those references to the past Fox films, and also to how kind of referencing how the Marvel Cinematic Universe is in a low point with phases 4 and 5. It's just not hitting, and he makes jokes about that at various points. And I love that kind of stuff, just the ability to make fun of themselves, because they clearly are not doing as well as they used to, and the fact that they can laugh at themselves a bit is commendable. And so yeah, it's great to see Ryan Reynolds really taking the piss in that regard. I did love that they kept them as the main heroes of the film. It was all about Deadpool and Wolverine. They didn't introduce some random side character, usually like a female these days, to just kind of undercut it all and be the true hero at the end of the day. No, they're the focus and they're the heroes, the ones that save the day, and they are made to look badass, especially this end scene where you've got Hugh Jackman's Wolverine, with the mask on, and then he's just using all his strength and literally shreds his costume off, and you just see him there jacked with the six-pack and all that like manly stuff. It's cool to see. We haven't seen that kind of energy in a long time in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, so it was fun to like revisit that, even if it is sort of in a comical way. But yeah, like I really can appreciate that they took these guys seriously with regards to making them and keeping them the heroes. To encapsulate everything that I liked about this film, you could pretty much say that everything that was good or great about it was fairly superficial. And what I mean by that is that, it's like action scenes that look great, a lot of laughs, a lot of humor, a lot of one-liners, and then at the same time you've got a bunch of cameos, which I'm going to talk about soon. You've got all these things that have no inherent value when it comes to storytelling or like character work, writing, all the dialogue, all of that stuff. Not so much that from the substantive standpoint. It's more just about the superficial aspect of the film. I thought was executed really well, and that's probably the parts of the film that I like the most when you talk about the superficial. But now, unfortunately, getting into the things that I disliked is we're going to talk about more of the substantive things of the film. First up for the dislikes is the anchor being. So I cringed in the cinema when I heard this term, because even though I know this is not a film that's meant to be taken seriously in any way, the level of contrivance with this sort of plot device was just off the charts. I mean, introducing this concept now in this film after all of these Marvel films where there is now something known as an anchor being, basically a protagonist of each universe. And when that protagonist dies, it basically means that universe is in deteriorating and is set to basically be destroyed and removed. So, and they determine that Wolverine is the anchor being of their universe, which is why the Deadpool's Fox universe is going to be removed. And so it's such a contrived, lame concept, anchor being. We've never heard of it before, and I would dare to say we're probably never going to hear of it again. It's such a stupid thing, and I can't believe that they introduced that here in this film. There are so many easier ways they could have introduced Wolverine into this film if they really want to have a Deadpool and Wolverine film. He literally has a time travel like device at the end of Deadpool 2. You could have easily gone back and he could have just easily gone and just collected Wolverine at the start of this film and had him and gone with that narrative, rather than introducing this whole concept, which is pretty like universe shattering when you think about it. The fact that every universe has an anchor being, this random person who's like the hero of each universe, makes no sense. So yeah, I dislike the hell out of that. And then there was the cameos. So what I will say is, in isolation, a lot of the cameos were great. Like it was fun to see, and obviously spoilers here, to see the likes of Jennifer Garner's Elektra, Wesley Snipes' Blade, to see Channing Tatum's Gambit, to see Chris Evans, who first you think is going to be Captain America and turns out to be Johnny Storm, who we also played. All these cameos abound everywhere, and they were all fun in isolation. But if you step back from the kind of being like a prisoner of the moment and just the excitement and rush that you get when you see them for the first time on the big screen, there is no substance to their actual inclusion in these films. Yes, you could say that they did help out. They did help Deadpool and Wolverine out at certain moments in the film, but their imprint on the film is non-existent. I mean, particularly when you talk about Elektra, Blade, and Gambit, their involvement, it's very much just for that fight scene, but we get no resolution with their characters whatsoever towards the end. And you can't help but compare it to Spider-Man No Way Home, which I'm on the record as saying I don't love that film. I think it's a good film. I don't think it's a great film, but I can't deny that that film absolutely handled the three Spider-Man, bringing the nostalgia from them, but making them useful to the plot and actually developing their characters further within that film, rather than just being stagnant and just being there as sort of like furniture to just kind of get a crowd moment, So that to me takes away, with what they did in this film with the cameos, the rewatchability of Deadpool and Wolverine is going to be severely diminished, because you only get excitement from seeing a cameo the first time you see them. Otherwise, after that, if there's nothing that's done that's substantive in any way, you don't get any enjoyment out of that. It's just literally like, why not just hold up a poster of them in the film and just people can cheer at that and be done with it? You might as well have that, because they were little more than posters when you think about their actual contributions to the film. So I think years ago, a lot of us, myself included, used to get super excited about cameos and lose our minds, and we would determine a film to be a good or great film because it had cameos. But really, I'm at this point now where they've done it so much in all of these films, not just in Marvel, Star Wars, everything like that, where the gimmick is had its time. It's time up. You can't do this anymore. It's no longer a thing. Okay, they got away with it with this film. Potentially, it's going to do a lot of money. This film make a lot of money and be successful. But I feel like this whole shtick of cameo is not what audiences want anymore, because there's no substance behind it. And speaking of substance, the story of this film is paper thin. And I'll reiterate again, I know this film is not meant to be taken very seriously, but we are in the Marvel Cinematic Universe here, whether you like it or not. Whether they like it or not, they've pulled him in, they've pulled Deadpool into this universe, a universe that has a huge established lore. There needs to be some sort of story here that does have some sort of ramifications for that universe. But it's a paper thin story where so many things don't make sense and are just contrived the hell out of each step of the way, just to have a scene that they wanted to have, just to have a fun scene. That's all they cared about. They didn't care about how they got there. They just wanted really shallow writing to get there. And to me, it was just laziness. I don't think they're not capable of doing it. I just felt like they thought, well, it's not that people don't really care about the story for a Deadpool film. They're just there for the laughs. And this is where the biggest dilemma of this film comes up for me, is like the question of, at what point does a film like Deadpool toe that line between lazy writing and sort of just, doing decent enough writing to service to laughs and the things that people come for, or just being plain lazy about it. It toes that line, and to me, it got into very lazy territory, starting off with that whole anchor being nonsense and just following all the way through all the contrivances along the way, all of the motivations to when fighting Nova and all this, like all of the scenes that they ended up in the film could have very easily been skipped over, but they forced themselves. They wanted to have that scene, and so they're just like, okay, whatever it takes to get there, we'll get there. So it was paper thin plot at best, but yes, I am more forgiving of a Deadpool film for being like that, but I still feel like they are using that facade as a reason to get away with having a very lazily written story. And I touched on this, but I'm going to say it again. Another thing I disliked is that it has no greater ramifications for the MCU. And you could say that that potentially is a good thing, that they didn't really touch on the greater ramifications of the MCU at this point because the MCU is in such a bad shape. But to me, they had the chance with this film to kind of correct some of the things about the MCU that are suffering at the moment, like the whole multiverse stuff. They could have really put a bow and like tied that one up and got rid of that whole multiverse thing with this film and made fun of it like relentlessly, so that then we could move on to just having one timeline again rather than all this multiversal nonsense. But it didn't, and it was an insulated film, but not in the best way, because like I said, it's insulated with its own story, but it doesn't help or correct the greater MCU in any way. It's just, it exists on its own, but doesn't exist to help it, which, previous MCU films, usually have some sort of greater ramifications for the overarching plot or phase or whatever timeline they're in. So yeah, that was disappointing to see. Despite all these issues I have, I still very much enjoyed the film. Like, I know it didn't make a lot of sense. It was really stupid, but it was also a lot of fun. And I'm not a cynical person to the point that I could dismiss all of the joy that I had with this film just because of the issues I have with it. I'm happy to separate them out. And so if I'm just going to judge it like this kind of like fun versus making sense factor, all that, I went into a Deadpool Wolverine movie more so expecting just the dumb fun. And to me, it definitely delivered. I'd say on that aspect, it kind of was like a 9 out of 10. But then when it came to story and plot, it was more like a 4 out of 10. And so if I'm balancing these both out, I'm probably giving this film something like a 7 out of 10. So yeah, that's my thoughts, guys. Basically, did not make much sense whatsoever, but it was a ton of fun. And if you haven't seen Deadpool and Wolverine yet, I would recommend you go see it, because it's the kind of film that you absolutely just switch your brain off and just absorb and enjoy the superficial fun that's on the screen, because that's all it's all about. There's not much weight to this film whatsoever. It's just dumb fun, and it delivers that in spades. And if that's what you're after, it's definitely the film for you. And so yeah, overall a positive review of Deadpool Wolverine, despite having some significant issues with it. I'm willing to be more forgiving of this kind of a film for that. So that's all my thoughts for this film today, guys. I'd love to hear yours in the comment section below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.